Welcome to Talking Synths, everybody. We're here in Los Angeles today with a very special guest, John King Gizmo King.
Yes.
Of the Dust Brothers. You're one half of the Dust Brothers.
I am.
And the other half is?
The other half is Mike Simpson.
And together, you two racked up a couple of Grammys, at least, right?
Well, we grabbed up a dump truck full of nominations. One Grammy for a little-known category called Album of the Year, with a very unknown artist named Carlos Santana. And then I actually, on my own, got another Grammy for, let's see, who was that for? That was for Steve Earle for Best Contemporary Folk Album.
Sweet.
I love different genres.
Yeah, and you did the music for Fight Club.
Yes.
Paul's Boutique.
Yes.
Beastie Boys.
Yes, absolutely.
Some pretty classic stuff there.
Yeah, people seem to be regarding Paul's Boutique well, which I like, because when we did it, I felt that it was really special and really awesome and really a great work. And then it proceeded to not sell as the record label hoped, and thus became more of a cult classic and sort of cult favorite, which turns out to be pretty cool, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it would be better if it sold really well, if that would stain it so that it didn't last and stand the test of time.
You sold out.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe to sell well, it would have had to be much more less worthwhile of an album.
Yeah.
But I mean, some great albums sell well too. So,
well,
who knows?
It was a success, certainly.
It was a success for me when we made it, and then not selling was really painful. The fact that it didn't sell. I mean, we wanted everyone else to love it too. And now that time has gone by and it's so revered, that feels great.
Yeah. And and we're here talking about synths.
Yes.
Because you have just an ungodly amazing collection of synths down in the studio there.
Yes. Yes.
Can you tell us what was your first one? How did you get into it?
Well, I don't know which things qualify as synths, or maybe some things are samplers. Are they still a synth? I mean,
okay,
very early on,
yeah.
The Roland S10, which I still have on my elaborate shelves in my studio.
And you get the mini discs for it?
Got the mini discs still in my studio drawers. They're beautiful. I love those little discs. Mm-hmm. They're really cool. So the S10 got used on Paul's Boutique, and also on like Tone Loc's first record and Young MC's first record, and just kind of everything we were doing back then. I mean, it was our sampler. And then we were really frustrated by the fact that it couldn't sample enough time and high enough quality and stereo. So we got the EMU HD or Emax HD or something like that. Maybe it was an Emax SE HD, which was a rack mount synthesizer with a hard drive, which was like hard drives were new back then.
Yeah.
This thing had a built-in hard drive. And so that was really cool. It was stereo output, but it didn't have stereo sampling, which turned out to be something really cool on things that we did like Paul's Boutique, because I would sample the left side of the record first that I was sampling, and then sample the right side and get the beginnings of them both the same way. There was no visual manifestation of the waveform. I would just put it so that it was, I would play a lower key, so it would play back very slow. And usually it would be for the most part, there'd be a beat at the beginning of it, a kick drum or something. So I'd be playing and be like, and I'm turning the start time up, and that would be my start time for the left side, and then do the same thing for the right side, and then have them be triggered at the same time. And that would give me some like really cool, kind of mind-altering stereo, because it was not perfectly in sync, but it also wasn't out of phase either. So it was just slightly off, slightly phased. You couldn't hear it. You didn't hear any like g-g, you didn't hear any double hits of anything, even like you didn't hear anything like that. It sounded like it was on, but I know in fact that it was not perfectly on, and I experienced it by how cool it sounded in the headphones.
Yeah, so probably just a few milliseconds off or something.
Something really small.
So you're striving for perfection.
Yeah.
Couldn't quite get there.
No.
And the fact that you couldn't quite get there made it perfect.
Made it cool sounding.
For the application.
Yeah, for the application. And limitations made things cool too. I've always noticed that over my career, is like artists that make amazing stuff on their 4-track tape machine back in the day, and then they get in the studio with like 24, 48 tracks. This is back analog era.
And lose the vibe. Huh?
And it doesn't, it's not as magical.
Yeah.
And it happens time and time and time again. Also, a lot of times artists go in and they make a record, and then they really are successful, and then they get to make another one and kind of have too much power, too much ability to do anything they can dream of. I feel like it sometimes affects the what is actually the true magic, which is not the fact whether this guy had a 48 tracks to record on or not. It's what he has in here.
Yeah.
And not losing like the emphasis on that.
Yeah. That's cool that you brought up the limitations. It's something we've talked about on our program before, of how limitations really inspire your creativity. And that's a good affirmation of that.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that you can just push a button to make something get to where you want, it's not really the same as dreaming up a part or coming up with a progression or lyrics or vocals that'll do it.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the highest level of the magic.
Yeah.
I feel.
What was your first project that you thought, hey, I really got something here to offer?
Well, I feel like it must have been Paul's Boutique, because the Tone Loc and Young MC stuff that we did didn't feel as important to our minds at that time, and in retrospect they don't feel as important. But we were using a similar technique of what we liked, what we sampled, how we put it together, how we made the beats, and for Paul's Boutique, we became empowered by the Beastie Boys' gravitas, that they were like important artists, because Tone Loc and Young MC were new artists, whereas the Beastie Boys were like, they had had a hit, they had had a record that sold millions of copies, and they were also like, their sense of style in terms of creating the music was so important. And they were there with us in the studio, whereas as we're doing things, not all the time, but like a lot more than, let's say, Tone Loc or Young MC, who came in and did their rap over the musical bed that we created. And the Beastie Boys participated in like helping get these things to the next level,
So maybe a lot more back and forth.
A lot more back and forth.
Yeah.
All the way around. And so that was definitely, I mean, while we were doing the Beastie Boys, Tone Loc had like whatever it did. I don't know, I can't remember if it was a #1 single or if it never quite made it there. The album maybe didn't quite make it to #1, but it was really up there.
Doing well. Yeah.
And Young MC did really well too. So we had records that did way better on the charts than Paul's Boutique did while we were working on Paul's Boutique.
Yeah.
But in terms of artistic importance, you know, we knew that the Beastie Boys were enabling us to and participating in making something that we all felt had artistic importance.
Yeah.
And wasn't bubblegum for the masses.
Yeah. Nice. Do you have any what would be a King Gizmo signature method or technique or sound? Do you have anything like favorites of, oh, I love taking a drum machine and running it through a such and such and doing a...
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I think one of the favorite elements where we really had a lot of power was scratching at the time. You know, there was much less, there was no Pro Tools, there was no computer garage band, nothing like that at all. You know, I had a piece of software that was Roger Powell's texture software that was basically, it looked like the Matrix. It was just like, and those were MIDI notes flying across the screen playing back. And so the place where we had the most power for a technique, and I really wasn't into gear back then either at all. I mean, I didn't know what anything did in the studio. I just knew that I could trigger MIDI and I could sample things. And but the root of what we were doing came from hip hop and rap production, where guys were, you know, making tape loops and cutting records to repeat sections and scratching to accentuate, bring up the drama, bring up a percussive element or even a sonic element. You know, if you're really skilled, you can bring you know, pitch variations and sonic elements with how fast you allow it to play when you let go of it or you're scratching it. You know, you scratch it fast and it does a high pitch thing. You scratch it a little slower, it does a low pitch thing. So with the right sound, you know, you can make melodic things happen and you can make rhythmic things happen and you can make magic happen with sort of like the transformer element, where you're striking the record on something that's making a rhythmic thing, but then you're also turning the sound on and off with the switch to make another rhythmic thing. And if you're really good, and my partner Mike was really good and able to do those kind of things where you got a complicated rhythmic pattern going. And the other added factor is that was, you know, that was dope shit to be doing. You know, like that was cool shit to be doing.
Yeah.
To be like making rhythmic and melodic things that had that edge to them, that it wasn't some guy sitting there on a Juno, you know, playing something which seemed at that time super lame. And now that's my favorite synth in my collection that I love to use all the time. But like back then, that was so boring. Like I'd much rather hear a beat going and some scratching happening.
Yeah.
A Juno would be terrifyingly boring because that's what was all over the radio on like pop songs and things that we were rebelling against, you know, as young people trying to forge a new path.
Yeah. Now you mentioned back then when you didn't really have gear. I'm gonna hazard a guess that that's changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Your studio is insane, packed with stuff and keyboards and effects units and stomp boxes, and it's amazing, and an incredible record collection.
Well, you always, the gear started with, for us, 2 turntables and a microphone and a 4-track cassette recorder.
Oh.
So that we could make mega mixes, which basically we would make super elaborate mega mixes using different instrumentals and acapellas and scratching and different songs playing over each other. Mm-hmm. And that is basically what we did when we started writing and producing and recording music, is layering different records basically over each other. Maybe a beat from one record and maybe a groove from another record, and then there's scratching happening and then a vocal happens over it. So it all comes from that hip hop production, which was ostensibly something you could do live as a DJ if you were the bomb. Yeah. If you had those skills, you could do that stuff live. And then to sort of take it to the studio level, you could start to use these computers to make these things happen robotically, basically, instead of having the most awesome in his prime DJ, actually performing it imperfectly but awesomely. So that was kind of like where it came from. And so we want these pieces of gear, 2 turntables, a microphone, a PA system, 4-track, and then like wanted my dad got me this IBM luggable computer and the IBM music feature card as a gift at the employee purchase price. And I had never heard of the stuff, but I put it together and got Roger Powell's texture software so that I could basically type in or trigger a note and then make sure it was like, because I'd play it probably and it'd be like, the MIDI notes would be like 133, and I'd go in there and edit it and make it on beat 111 and then tell it to be a 2-bar loop, and then boom, I got a beat.
Yeah.
Sampled off a record. Now, I had to also buy a sampler, so I had to buy that Roland S10 where I could sample the beat onto, or the groove. And then I never bought the SP12, but another person who worked with us on Paul's Boutique, who has passed away, Matt Dyke, one of the 3 of us who worked on that record, as the Dust Brothers for that record. But after that record, the Dust Brothers was me and my original partner Mike, and Matt had an SP12. And the awesome thing about that, first of all, was that he would program kick-ass beats and he would program full songs on it. And then he'd reach his limitation, and I'd have to come in and go beyond that. For example, with Wild Thing. So with Wild Thing, I have a credit on that because they could only get to a certain point, and then they needed longer samples. And the ability to make them all work together and sync to tape and do all this magic that we could do. And so I did that for Wild Thing and lots of other things. But the next sort of magic thing we got was a Emax hard drive sampler, and that was while we were making Paul's Boutique. And that's where I got into the stereo, 1 at a time stereo sampling, so that I could have more mind-bending, stereosonic magic going on for the Beastie Boys.
So that's kind of a King Gizmo signature deal there.
Yeah. And then, beyond that, we started to learn by doing. So we'd have our little studio, and we didn't know what a mic pre was, or where a microphone got plugged in or anything like that. So we got a board, Soundcraft. First we got the Tascam MM1, and we liked that because you could do automation on it, MIDI wise. So they were snapshots the same as at Delicious Vinyl, we worked on this Soundcraft board that had this automation system where you press the space bar to go to the next page
Snapshot,
or whatever they would call it, or snapshot. And that's how we would have to arrange our music. With the Beastie Boys, we used mostly fancier boards, so it had, Neve, flying faders, automation, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But we would lay our loops on a full-length track, basically. So if you were to play everything with all the faders open, it would sound kind of crazy. It'd all be in sync, but it'd sound kind of crazy. So we'd have to then arrange the song using the automation.
Right.
So with the Neve, it was awesome because you could just turn one thing on and off. With the Soundcraft, you had to be like, you'd have to press a button to go to a new scene. So you'd have to create this scene and then run back and then do it. So it did take some of the sort of spontaneity out of it. Like with the Neve thing, there was more of a magic, like you're playing the mixing board, basically.
Performing
because
on
of
the
way we laid everything down.
Yeah.
I would be there, basically playing a keyboard at the big old Neve console for the Beastie Boys, just like. And when I do it, I'd be like Liberace, I'd be like, and I'd basically be doing those Liberace kind of moves, and I'd feel it, and it'd be like a musical performance for me.
That's great.
Doing that. But then to get into like how gear progressed for me, it was just bit by bit, and it'd be like the first compressor we got was a Summit TLA or 100 or whatever it was, 100A tube compressor. And I didn't know how to use that thing either, but I kind of knew that's a thing that we needed.
Did you learn a lot of stuff, or did you discover things by doing things wrong because you didn't know?
I only learned how to really use things once the internet was booming. So that was long after I had most of my gear.
But did you do things wrong? Quote
wrong
that
wrong,
were like really cool?
Whatever sounded right.
Yeah.
And if it didn't sound right, I would have very little knowledge of how to make it sound right, besides just starting to turn knobs and not really knowing what I should be doing. And so that would for sure lead to doing things in a cool way. But gradually, I learned how to get what I wanted and just bought way too much gear. Mostly before it went way up in price.
Yeah.
So it turns out to have been a good investment for me.
Yeah.
I mean, U47s and Blackface 1176s and just all kinds of stuff, all the Telefunk and stuff and the Neves and just...
And maxi chords and mini Moogs.
All the synthesizers. I mean, some of them haven't gone up as much, some of the sort of kitschy ones that I got, but then the ones that are more serious that people are still looking for, they've really gone up a lot in value, which is great.
Yeah. And I love that you love the kitschy things.
Yeah,
I remember last time we were here, you showed us the little red toy.
The Tota tune.
Yeah.
And and that's like one of my favorite sounds because it sounds like it's breaking.
Yeah.
Like when you hit the key, it's like you've invented electricity, and you're like flipping that big switch and it goes like, and you're like Frankenstein even,
That's
creating
great.
the monster and with the lightning bolt, because you hit the key and it's like, you hear it making the primitive connection in there and going like, and that's part of the attack of the sound that you want. It's like a B3 when it has that, crispy attack.
And it's something unique. And you're creative enough to capture that and
now you can't tune it. I mean, you can use a tuning
you can
plug-in on it, but it's a toy. And I like it. The Optigon's a toy too. That's really
the Optigon's amazing,
fantastic.
Yeah.
But it really shows its toyness in terms of its ability
quality.
to kind of poorly perform.
Yeah.
Mine works pretty good, but I don't touch like you feel like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing, and I really need it, and it's so great, and you use it a couple times, and then it just kind of sits there, not getting used.
Well, it's not like it's the workhorse
Right.
you use on every track kind
Yeah.
of deal, but when you use it, it's so special.
Yeah,
So,
and I also, it's nice that over the pandemic, I actually got it put in place and got a wire running like all the way to the patch bay from the other side of the room that I never had before. So now it's all like wired up and ready to go at a moment's notice, which I really like. I've used part of the pandemic getting my studio more like good to go, as opposed to pulling something dusty off the shelf and blowing at it and trying to find a cord long enough to set it on the table way on the other side and plug it in and make sure it works and everything. I've been trying to pull it all together because I love having things at your fingertips. It's really hard when like your collection is sitting on the shelf. It's like it really wants to be there ready to go when you're working with somebody.
yeah, and if you're working and in the creative mode, it's not a good time to say, "Well, let's pull that down and see if it still works."
Yeah,
and yeah.
It can be. It can take up a lot of your time.
Yeah.
When you don't have so much time.
And so now that maybe the pandemic is getting behind us, hopefully you'll be back into making some serious music pretty quick. Any teasers on what might be to come? Or?
Well, I wonder. I haven't thought about this. I've definitely been approached about getting back in the studio, and I feel like beyond that, I really want to work on my own stuff, which took a back seat for decades to big and cool artists, not big and cool artists, also grabbing my attention, being the recipient of my songs that I was working on, and I kind of, as time goes on, I feel like I want to have some of my songs be for myself. And I'm not sure what that will be.
Yeah.
But I was listening to a really cool instrumental just the other day. I can't remember what it is, but a great artist, and there's just this kick-ass instrumental song going, and I'm like, I think at this point I could be allowed to do instrumentals. Like back in the day, we had all these instrumentals that became like Paul's Boutique and Songs for MC and Tone Loc and various other artists back through the years. And but those songs could have been released as instrumentals too. They were that interesting. So that's kind of a challenge to me to like try to take that kind of stuff to a level. And back then I felt kind of like those weren't okay. That wasn't okay. Those weren't real songs yet. But, over the decades that have gone by since I started, which was, I'd say I started in the, early to mid 80s. It's become obvious that songs that are instrumentals can do well too, not in terms of chart topping, but in terms of just like being viable expressions that people enjoy you doing out there.
Well, that sounds great. I'm going to look forward to hearing some of that.
I mean, you think about like Smack My Bitch Up by Prodigy, and that's an old reference, but there's very little vocals going on in that. And it's a very moving and a song that a lot of people love. And there's many more examples than that out there, but that's just one that came right to my head because I was listening to it recently.
I'd love to hear some solo work from you.
Yeah. And maybe it won't be solo, who knows? But I just mean staying outside of where I have been in the past, which is just kind of delivering these songs or bases for songs, and they kind of become part of someone else's repertoire.
Yeah, yeah.
And rightly so, but it's just a choice that's made at that point.
Yeah.
You know, I'd love to have a repertoire to reference, whether it be for performances or audio-visual manifestations of it, because, you know, songs that I've done with other artists, they aren't really available to me like that.
Yeah.
You know, they really, even though I have whatever ownership I have of them, they really belong to the other artists. I mean, their name is the name that's the artist's name on the product and on the work, and you know, they deserve that, and so I want some songs of my own.
Good. I'm going to look forward to hearing those.
Yeah.
Well, we're about out of time.
Okay, good.
And this has been great. I really appreciate you talking to us.
It's my pleasure. And oh my gosh, I know this is the wrong episode, but that keyboard that you brought, the King Gizmo, I don't even know what I'm going to be calling that.
We called it the Gizmotron.
The Gizmotron. I was thinking, yeah, that's a good one. Gizmotic came in as part of the first, you know, the Gizmotic modulator. That might not be right for that keyboard. I might have that for some other kind of thing, an effect that's made maybe.
Sounds nice.
Yeah.
Keep us posted.
I will, absolutely.
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for tuning in, and with that, we'll modulate her.